It's media day. The offseason is over. The new season starts today. We'll get to hear from coaches and players. What do the Pacers need to answer to? What will be asked? What is important? We'll hear about it all right now on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Monday and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI. And today, congratulations, you made it through the summer since late May. 4 months. No Pacers stuff. Summer League kind of in there. The Olympics kind of in there. But it's time for the season to be back. Media Day is today. We'll get to hear from many key Pacers figures, basically the whole rotation, and Rick Carlisle at least. And we'll get to ask about lots of stuff. I will be there, of course. So tomorrow I'll get to hear about what was said and what mattered, hopefully with a guest who was also there. And I have lots of questions that I want to know stuff about, or what I think is going to be important for certain people to say. And we're going to talk about that today. Very happy to make it through the offseason without having to go down to 4 days a week this summer. It was very fun, and Media Day will also be very fun. And I want to go talking about what I want to hear from people, or what I think will be meaningful to hear from certain people and why. But I think I want to generically start with stuff that I think would be relevant no matter who you asked, because there's lots of questions that are player specific that we'll get to today. And there's some people that are more important answering certain questions, and that will come up when talking about that person. But there's some things that I think hearing from anybody would be valuable. One, because it's just valuable information to know many perspectives on. And two, the slight differences in answers would be revealing in a negative or positive way. And I think the first thing that generically I would like to hear from just about anybody is about continuity, and not continuity of just like, why is it good? That's obvious, right? The idea has been the same since the last time the Pacers had continuity with the Brogdon, Sabonis, Turner teams. And that's that early in the season, there's less hurdles of, what terminology is, how you're trying to play, how your tendencies work together. You know that stuff. And teams that are newer have those issues. And you can use that to your advantage. And for the Pacers, whose schedule is harder at the beginning, that could matter, right? I know that. We all know that. But that alone, is that enough to feel like you're a better team? Is that alone enough to feel like you're a better team? And if not, what a part of being a very what part of having a lot of continuity makes the Pacers think they can be better? We heard this from Chad Buchanan and Ted Wu last week. I thought their answer made a lot of sense and was similar to what I would say, but I want to hear it from Rick Carlisle. We'll talk about him in a second. And I want to hear it from the players on the team. What do they think being together again? How will that make them better? Is it just youth? Is it a chemistry thing? Is it something else that I haven't even considered, right? And it's different from the last era of continuity because, one, they're much younger. Two, that team had continuity but changed coaches, right? It's just different now with this group where it makes a lot more sense, and they're building off of something much more meaningful. And so it's still stuff to learn, right? What does this actually mean to them? Why do they think it will be valuable? Two, something you could hear from anybody. Defense. How does this team get better defensively? And guess what? We asked a lot about defense last year too. So there'll be two kind of undertones to that answer. One, is anything different from last year that matters? And two, if it's similar to last year in terms of get better at this or that, what are they actually doing to apply those things, right? Because we heard about the one-on-one drills. They changed their scheme. They're focused on this instead of that and giving up these shots instead. Are they going away from that? Is it similar drills but a different scheme? Is it a different scheme but similar drills? How do they hammer home this stuff? What is it going to take for this team to defend better? Chad Buchanan was asked about that last week also, and he talked about the number of drives they gave up and that being something they have to correct. And that's true. They gave the most rim points in the league, but part of that was the way they defended and being, especially early in the season, so unwilling to give up threes that they gave up these rim shots. What does that look like now? Is it going to be similar? Like, we would ask different people about the defense last year, and we learned from Rick Carlisle that they're playing a new scheme very broadly. And then we learned from Aaron Nesmith that they said, oh yeah, we want to take away some different shots. And then Bruce Brown was more specific than that. And you just get more and more from everybody. So that one will probably come up a lot. And the third thing is, generically from anybody, how do you feel like you can repeat your success from last year, right? Is it possible uh, let me phrase that. It's obviously possible, but like, can you run in the same way as last year in terms of approach and style and feel like you can do it? Or do you need to do more? Do you need to do things differently? What did last year's run teach this team about the approach required to reach the conference finals? And was there any moment they didn't feel like they had that stuff down that they now will be able to do for 82 games or for a full season because they've seen what it takes, because they know what it feels like and what the long-term effects of a successful season are and what they can be? That's the generic stuff that I think anyone can answer and can tell you something that I would take away like, okay, like their perspective matters, because various players had different reactions to the run and different players are better at different things on defense. Their interpretation probably matters, and continuity. Some players have had it before and some haven't. Myles Turner, I think, would be a great answer for the continuity question, because he has been on teams that had it before and it didn't lead to a lot of success. So what can make this one in particular different? And that is, I think, if all of Media Day was me asking everybody who came through about those three things, I would learn probably a good amount. That's not what I'm going to do, and that's not what everybody should be doing, but that would lead to a lot and would make for a productive day in terms of getting player thoughts on certain things. Then we'll learn more during training camp. But let's talk more specifically about lots of key figures who will be speaking. So I'm going to run through all the rotation guys, except for Isaiah Jackson, who we're going to hear from tomorrow, and what I think will be interesting to hear from them, or what I would like to ask them more about. And maybe some of these questions come up later in the week during camp. Maybe they come up at Media Day. So we'll do a Media Day recap tomorrow, and then later, maybe next week, maybe later this week, depending on how much stuff we get. We'll do like early practice notes and updates about the team and all sorts of stuff like that. Rick Carlisle, the head coach. I did questions for him in terms of his season already. And we'll do previews this week, by the way. We'll do small forwards and power forwards both this week. Rick Carlisle, I want to hear from him. Do you anticipate changes to your defensive scheme, right? Was last year's strategy revealing in any way? Do you feel like for the personnel you have, last year's strategy was correct? Because there's certain parts that their defense that are necessary to tie into the way they want to play offense, but at the same time, they stunk on defense, right? So, it's hard. So you're more susceptible to giving up offensive rebounds if you give up threes, and the Pacers are great in transition, but they give up the layup line. Like all this together, what do they want to change something? Should they? What does that look like? That's one thing I'll be interested in. And if they do make changes, what does it look like? What specifically is different? How do they think it will help them given the personnel they have? He'll be good for that. And again, everybody will be in some ways good about defense. And perhaps we'll hear more defensive stuff as the week progresses, because they'll have practices to actually work on these things and see what it looks like and feel it and connect in it and all that kind of stuff. 2 from Rick. What does he think his team can be with the same talent as last year, right? Is it as easy as this team made the Eastern Conference Finals last year? They can do it again. They've kind of said no to that, but that's what they did in the summer. Does it require a different approach because their expectations are higher? And that in particular is something I would like to know about from him, right? Does his job change at all when there's expectations? Does he have to handle his conversations differently with players when there's expectations on winning way more than developing, whereas last year winning was just slightly, at least going into the season, perceived as more important than developing, right? Where does Rick Carlisle land on that? And how specifically does he think this team can be better with similar talent? How does his job change? And 3, what does he hope to do better this year, right? Everybody wants to be better. We harp on this all the time with players. What did you work on in the summer? And we'll ask that tomorrow and throughout the week. How do you feel like you'll be a better player this year? What can you do to help this team win games? These questions all matter. And hearing what players say and seeing if they actually do it is important. A lot of times they don't. Sometimes they do. What about coaches? We don't ask them about that as much. It's different for them. They can't just hit the gym for 6 hours a day and all of a sudden they're faster and can do different coaching things. But what did he think a lot about, or what does he want to see differently from this team, or what did he learn about his own skill set last year with this team? All sorts of stuff that you can grow in as a coach. Growth is not just limited to players, and I think it's fun to ask coaches questions that I ask players sometimes, because we don't typically go that way. So I think learning that kind of stuff from Rick will be also pretty revealing, especially going into, again, a season of expectations. And how specifically does that change his job? I'll be curious. Let's get to the players. The guys who will be playing on the floor, the guys who have to feel all this stuff. They have to execute the new defense if there is one. They have to play together for the second year in a row. Can they repeat that success? What is going to be important? Let's keep rolling. Tyrese Haliburton health. Let's get to the bottom of that before we talk about that stuff, though. We have to very quickly, everybody, talk about FanDuel. Oh my gosh, NFL fans, the season is rolling. 4 weeks in, bye weeks are coming up, but yet you can keep rolling this season with big returns on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get that hunch, it's the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can see that live play-by-play and way more, all the stuff you need information-wise to act on your hunch. You can see all that stuff right in the same page where you place bets on FanDuel. It's perfect right there in one place. You can get started on FanDuel with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Follow that hunch, $5 bet, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is on FanDuel.com. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day for your second listen. Locked On Colts. If you're local, you might be interested in the Colts. They're 2-2. They beat the previously undefeated Steelers. Anthony Richardson did some stuff. Joe Flacco did some stuff. Anthony Richardson got hurt. Jonathan Taylor got hurt. And yet they won. Countless things to talk about from the Colts game. Jake and Zach will be all over it. I have already listened to their episode of Locked On Colts. It's very good because I didn't watch the game and I learned a lot about what happened and how it went down. And that's how I was able to summarize it just now for you. Let's continue Pacers time, media day, the last day of September. So many ways to call this just a natural cutoff into this upcoming season. It's back. Basketball, NBA basketball is rolling. There's a preseason game this week. This week on Friday, preseason NBA basketball is back. The Stars will be playing again. I can't wait. Tyrese Haliburton will speak. I feel like I have less questions for him than most fans do, but a couple things. One, his health, right? This will come up for Mathurin too. I'll just plant that seed in your mind now, right? We've heard Rick refer to it a little bit on the radio with Kevin and Sweeney on the morning show. You know, that kind of added some timing context, I guess. Chad Buchanan kind of addressed it and said, yeah, he's healthy, he's ready for camp. Okay, that's all great, but like what happened? Is it the left leg again? Is that actually a concern? Is it something else? We heard the term MRI from Windhorst. That's scary. So what is it? What happened? Is he okay? You know, if he's healthy now, he participated in a mini camp by the looks of things. What was the recovery time, right? Lots of questions on that and if it will have any long-term effects. So that's obvious, right? Something I will be curious about with Tyrese Haliburton is what is motivating him these days? Because, look, he doesn't need something specific or generic to be like, this thing is motivating me right now. He could pull a tweet. He said this, that he could just find a tweet from someone with 2 followers being like, hey, you suck. And all of a sudden he's ready to go. But after an offseason like this, where he is making the group project joke and people are talking about his season and the team the Pacers are playing, getting hurt, like that's the kind of stuff that Tyrese Haliburton will remember forever. He bookmarks stuff. He remembers it, right? But I want to know what specifically is motivating him this year. No longer fighting for the contract, got the gold medal. That's all great. I think he will be motivated, but what is it, right? What is it? What is he trying to prove? What does he want this season to look like after an All-NBA year? And I think his perspective on the team being better will be fascinating because so much of the team's identity is him and what he does, right? And so what does he think this team can do to be better this year with almost exactly the same team? Is it him being better? Is it role guys fitting into his style better? Is it knowing each other better? Is it defending better? If so, can he defend better? Right? All sorts of stuff that you'd want to hear from a team basically spokesman. I mean, he is the face of the franchise. What does he think that looks like? Let's go to Myles Turner next. Myles Turner, of course, the lobbed up first question is going to be this, and people hate lob questions, but guess what? I'm going to lob up this question too because I like details for stories. 10 years with one franchise. That's crazy. That is nuts. What does that feel like? Has he thought about it? Has he registered it? Does it actually have some sort of significance to them? You never know when a team could hey, let's just switch this up and change this up. You know why I say that? Because Karl Towns was about to hit 10 years with Minnesota. Psych. That's not happening unless something crazy happens with that trade. Does it cross his mind that how rare this is? Last year's the first time to me. I mean, he's talked about it a lot before, but last time he talked about it a lot. How much Indy started to click with him and him realizing how much it was part of his life. And then he had a career year and then the team had a bunch of success. Now what? Now what's hitting him about his career, this franchise, et cetera? Because not only does that matter for what he's thinking about and what his focuses are. But like with free agency coming next year, his opinion of the franchise and his career is really important. So I'll be curious how he feels about that. I want to know what's a successful season to Myles Turner, because finally these last 2 years, credit to him, people made fun of him, including me a little bit. I wouldn't say I made fun of him, but I had questions about what he was saying. He always would say when he was in that, 12 points a game, but elite defense group, I can do more on offense. I can be better. And at that stage, he was like 6-7 years into his career. It's like, okay, if you could, you would do it. And I that's what I thought, at least at times. Well, he did it. He was right. He was 100% right that in the right situation with the right roster, he could be way better on offense. And he was. That's awesome. Terrific offensive player, peaking in efficiency, doing it on more volume. That's great. Now what, right? Now he's proven that he can be this offensive guy. Can he pair that with the defensive level that he had before? Is there something else that would be success to him? Maybe it's winning another round. Maybe it's ascending in some other way in his offensive game, because that kind of player who can shoot, finish around the basket, has athleticism, all these things, that's great. Now what? Right now, what does Myles Turner say he can do and then do it? What does he think about his next steps? Because it's been so impressive to see him step up in the ways he's described. But now what? Right now, what happens for him? Because you just look at the pockets of his career where he was like a 4 and then a backup behind Mahinmi, and then he was doing a different stuff early and then even more different stuff where he was told to work around the rim, and then all of a sudden he's a 4 again, and he's playing with Sabonis, and he's awesome on defense, and then he's not playing with Sabonis, and then he's awesome on offense, and now he's very good next to the Pacers stars. Now what? Now what next for Myles Turner? What does he think of his defensive level the last couple of years? Because if I'm Myles Turner, so first of all, I think everybody's acknowledged that he's not the defender he once was. Like, duh, you could just watch him. But like, why? One, why? And two, what does he think, right? Because if you're Myles Turner, I think you'd very easily could just look at anyone, including me, and go, hey, our defense has been terrible. I can't stop all this stuff myself. They don't run as much drop, which is what he was amazing at when he was this peak, incredible defender. And he has a lot of messes to clean up. So much so that it's like impossible for one person to do it. So he might say, I think I'm defending pretty well, given all the stuff I'm required to do and all the stuff that is relevant to my success and our team's success. And that's correct. That's true. So what does he think of his defensive level in recent seasons, and what does he hope happens this year on that end of the floor? Let's go to TJ McConnell. TJ McConnell is an interesting one to me because we haven't heard from him since his extension, at least in this setting. He did talk about it in like a social media video the Pacers posted. And he also, Wish TV had this, Angel Morian and Andrew Chernoff. He did the anvil for a Colts game. For those of you who don't know, that's like their rev it up when they smack this anvil, like at the crowd hype right before the game. He did that a couple games ago. And he talked about his extension with those two on Wish TV. So he has like addressed it. But, what made the timing right? Why did this come together? What makes Indy the perfect fit for him? Now you can't be traded this year. Like, what does this all mean for your family, right? Especially at his age to get a contract like this. Like, just a lot of, what, why, when, where, how details about the TJ McConnell experience, right? That's the kind of stuff that I really like and matters telling the story of this, because with most players this summer, Pascal Siakam can sign early in June, and he did it. He was the first free agent that we even heard about all summer agreeing. And Obi Toppin becomes restricted free agent June 30th, and he signs with the Pacers right before that. And Andrew Nembhard can be extended on July 21st, and he gets extended the 23rd or whatever those dates were in the 20s, right? Everybody that what happened with them, James Wiseman could get signed on July 1st. He signed July 2nd or 3rd, right? Everybody who had something happen to them, it was right after a deadline or like right when it made sense that this would be a key topic for their transaction. TJ McConnell became extension eligible July 6th, and he didn't sign it till late August. So like what led to all that being the way it was and how it got to this point? What is next for him? Also, another Rick question would be general health of the whole team. Is anyone going to be hurt entering the season? Sorry, I just saw that I missed that in my notes. The other McConnell question I would have is about Ben Mathurin, ironically, because I kind of alluded to this on preview episodes for point guards and shooting guards, but so much of McConnell's ascent last year overlapped with Mathurin being out for the season, which was to me all too predictable given the way that second unit played. But he was amazing. His usage went way up and his efficiency did not dip at all, to the point that it was like, wow, this guy is a primary option and it's working every game. So now that Mathurin is returning, can McConnell keep up that momentum? What does that look like? What does he foresee the synergy of that backcourt being and how it makes the bench hum and sing and do their thing at a high level? That's really what I'm curious about for him. I also think he would be a good continuity guy because he, too, like Myles Turner, was back on those teams that had continuity before with Brogdon, Sabonis, LeVert, Warren, etc., and ran back a very similar roster 2 years in a row because similar to this season, the cap did not go up very much. Back then, it was harder to add talent at the time. Same to now. What did that feel like at the time? How did you feel like that team could be better, and what's different about this one? Couple more guys, including Pascal Siakam. I want to talk about what to expect from their media day. Before we get to them, though, let's talk about the good folks over at Gametime, the best way to get tickets to the latest events near you. Sports, comedy, theater, whatever you're into, you can get the tickets on Gametime. They have a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting those tickets even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff. You only get shown incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste time searching through thousands, sometimes, of tickets. They have super deals. They have the best process for buying concert tickets with the Gametime Picks. They have curated deals. You can see the seat view from the arena, what it might look like on the app. Spot on for the time I used it in New York. They have their lowest price guarantee, meaning you can get a little bonus if you find a credit. Excuse me, not a bonus. If you find tickets that are cheaper somewhere else. All sorts of things that make it the best way to get tickets, all in pricing feature that you can toggle on or off, right? Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. I alluded to this a little in the Myles Turner section. Your second listen should be Locked On Knicks or Locked On Wolves, maybe even Locked On Hornets. Wow. Karl Anthony Towns to the Knicks. Wow. That is unbelievable, especially given the timing. Julius Randle to the Wolves. The Hornets getting probably draft picks. Maybe Dwayne Washington, former Pacers, involved in this, and maybe the luckiest man ever to get several $1 million just to be traded. Congrats to him on whatever happens. He's hooping for Partizan right now. Crazy trade. Really fun cap trade, by the way. No one cares but me, but it's very exciting how many fun rules and wrinkles are involved to make this possible in the way that looks like it's going to happen. And no one cares, but I will opine. I like this trade for Minnesota way more than it seems like everybody else does. Not that I think they should have been tripping all over themselves to trade Karl Towns. He's really good, but that is a good trade to me for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Let's talk about the Pacers media day. Pascal Siakam, the best guy we haven't talked about yet. I already alluded to this in my veterans question thing, and I've talked about this a lot, but something I want to ask him is, and maybe some other players who've dealt with similar situations, what does training camp mean when you had a midseason trade? We've heard from him and everybody, hey, this could be a good Tyrese question, right? What did training camp help you with after being with a team for the season prior? And what does that mean for Pascal, right? What is him being in camp going to do to make him more effective? Because that's been talked about so much. Does it help him with terminology, defense, schemes? What specifically on this team that's running it back largely, what specifically does he feel like that will help him with? Something else that a lot of Siakam questions for me are things that he's been involved in before that we know about that I really want him to answer to with more clarity. He's been on a team, the Raptors, that won a championship. And then he didn't make it back to the conference finals until last year with the Pacers, and talked about taking that for granted. So he saw up close what it looks like, and Kawhi left. There was a different reality than the Pacers are in right now, but he saw up close a team go from the peak to not being able to get back to that. Why did that happen? And what can the Pacers do to avoid that happening now? Is there anything specific they should be focused on? Is there any bonding they need to be doing? Is there any sort of expectation ignoring they need to somehow figure out how to do? What can the Pacers do to avoid that fate and not have Siakam go through that stretch again, and everybody go through that kind of feeling and emotion of going from so high to really floundering to get back, because that did happen for him for a long time. Ben Mathurin will be an interesting guy to hear from tomorrow. We heard from him in his Eggs interview back in May, and that was the last time we heard from him since March 5th. Very infrequent speaker because he was hurt. He was out. What is his health status? First of all, we've seen the videos. We've heard this from lots of people. Seems like he's good. What does he say? What was his rehab like? How did that process go? right? That's obviously important to all this. What's important to him? What was important to him this summer, right? We saw him working with Clay last year on shooting. That he was a better shooter. That's a skill that really matters for him for fit and skill purposes. What did that look like this summer with Team Canada or with whoever he worked out with or even playing with the Pacers? What did he try to focus on? What did he identify as things that he needs to get better at to help this team as much as he possibly can? Ben Mathurin is a great player. It's all about fit with him. We talked about that a lot on the shooting guards preview last week. What does fit look like? Yes, that's all great, but what to him was important this summer to attack that in the right way in terms of reads, in terms of passing, in terms of shooting, in terms of defense, blah, blah, blah. And that kind of bleeds into my what was his focus this summer, right? What was important to him in the summer? What was his focus this summer? And what's that going to look like in terms of being important this season, right? What did he work on in a way that as he heads into the season, he can go, it was very important for me that I was able to get to 40% from three or 3 assists per game or being close to or at Nesmith and Nembhard's level of defense. What will he smile at some point during the season or after the season or whatever, because he got much better at something that made him awesome on this team. Andrew Nembhard, speaking of Canada, let's jump over the other Canadian. What did the Canada, we talked about a lot with Haliburton because he was with the creme de la creme of the NBA with Team USA, or most of them. What did Andrew Nembhard learn with Canada and Shea and Jamal Murray, who stunk, but is a star who's on that team, right? What did he learn from these other NBA guys about habits he can have, how he can be better? He got a lot of praise from a lot of those guys, but what did he take from them that could matter going into the season, particularly Shea, another herky-jerky kind of two-way effective guard. Drew's probably as good as a defender as SGA to me, but what did he take from that experience? How did it make him better? How did it make him have more thirst for this season? All sorts of stuff like that, because Canada did not do as well as they hoped, as anybody thought they would, including me. So what did that experience mean for Andrew Nembhard? How does he think he can build off of his playoffs, right? Can he actually sustain that in lineups where he has the ball less often? Can he be a better defender because he learned from Jalen Brunson? He's got some work to do on that end. Can he be that level of shooter that he was in the postseason for an entire year, right, where he shot almost 40% from three after returning from his in-season tournament injury? But obviously that doesn't count, right? I can't just make up a sample, be like, yeah, this was close, this counts. 48.3% in the playoffs, that's unreasonably high. Is his reality somewhere in between what we've seen? Is it already what we've seen? What does he want to build off of from the playoffs, from a shooting perspective, from a wow, this guy can't be stopped perspective, and from a defense perspective? And what does he think it'll take for this team to be better? I'll probably ask him and Ben Mathurin that one, because they're two like the central figures of it. Two of the guys who have a lot of upside, are young, 2 years into their careers, are very good. Now what? Can they be better in a way that makes this team significantly better this season? Drew will be an interesting one. The last two guys are probably the least interesting for questions. And that's Aaron Nesmith and Obi Toppin, because they have, they're both young or in less experience, but no one thinks of them as these like much higher ceiling guys or a star of all the players we already talked about, even though they are very good. And Aaron Nesmith got a lot better last year, and Obi Toppin got a lot better last year in ways that really mattered for the Pacers. But, it's only Obi's second season. He's less with the Pacers, I should say. Like, his opinion of continuity is a little different than even Aaron's or even a lot of these other guys. And I'll be curious about Aaron Nesmith's take on the defense, but all sorts of stuff. So Aaron Nesmith, one, does he think this team can be better on defense? If so, what does it take? Do they need to change some things schematically? What can he do to help? He's already their best wing defender, but what else can happen there? And, what does he make of the continuity since he's been here for basically the whole rebuild? A little later than everybody else, because the Brogdon trade came in the summer after a lot of these guys were acquired, but that means he didn't get that continuity kind of period. In that first year, the team he was on's had continuity since he was there and got drafted, right? What does he make of all this and how it could help this team? Because his role changed so much last year, right? Now that it's different, where his role won't be changing, what does he think about it? Remember at this time last year, no one was even sure Aaron Nesmith would be in the rotation. I said I would be building backwards from a point where he is in it, but we weren't sure. He earned it. Obi Toppin, similar questions to Aaron Nesmith. What does he think this team needs to be better on defense, including potentially his own improvements? What does he make of the continuity? The Knicks teams he's been on and this Pacers team had very different path. The Knicks team, as it continues to do, has changed a lot. The Pacers team didn't change at all. What does Obi Toppin feel like he can be better at? Last year was a lot of important things. He got a little bit better at rebounding. He fit very well with the Pacers, but most importantly, and this will apply to a lot of guys for forever time, he could shoot. That changed my opinion of the whole trade and Obi Toppin's ability He could make threes with any setup man in any situation. He would square up, he'd shoot, he'd make it. Huge for his development, huge for the Pacers. He can play so many roles. He doesn't have to be in niche lineups. He doesn't have to be with certain point guards. That's huge. Can he do that again? That's not really a question I would ask him. He would say, of course, he'll try to, but it matters for the Pacers if he can do it again. Everybody else I didn't talk about today, we might not get at media day, but we'll get them throughout the week. So if you want to hear something specific from someone else, either tweet at me at Tony R. East or comment down below. If you're watching on YouTube, tomorrow we'll obviously talk about what was said at media day, hopefully with a guest who was also there that can provide more insight on the most interesting things from throughout the day. And then we'll do small forwards and power forward season preview later this week, as well as notes from early practices. You guys can learn everything you can about this team, plus the general news going on. They made a lot of roster moves in the most recent days. Jahlil Okafor's in the mix now. He's not going to be in camp, though, so I have to update you on all that. So that'll also come later this week. Thank you guys for listening and rocking with Locked On Pacers all throughout the summer. We made it. It's happening. Basketball back. You can find it here every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you very soon.